I'm Jill Simpson from PBLMatters. I facilitate project-based learning training, and I'm here today talking with my good friend and former colleague, Brooke Hunter, who is an intervention specialist at Shanahan Middle School, Olentangy schools. How you doing, Brooke?
Great, how are you?
I'm well, thanks.
Good.
Let's talk about intervention, because a lot of times when I'm talking to teachers, they come in with the preconceived notion that project-based learning is for gifted kids. Oh, it's a great methodology for gifted kids. How would you respond to that?
Well, I do agree that PBL is a great methodology for gifted kids. I also agree that it's a great methodology for kids on IEPs and 504s, differently abled learners, and then also the typical population. I was taught that PBL is for everybody, and I think that let's see, how many years have I been with the PBL team? 7?
Wow.
7 years with the PBL team. I think that that's a testament to the fact that PBL really is for everybody. We really try to cultivate that team atmosphere on our PBL team. We have about 100 kids and about 15 to 20 on IEPs or 504s. And we have noticed that a lot of our kids on IEPs and 504s are for the first time enjoying coming to school. Because they're experiencing something different than they have in the past. So it's not the traditional butts and seats learning all the time that sometimes our kids, with ADHD have a lot of trouble with, or kids with autism or anxiety, whatever it is. And they're able to express their talents in a different format, and they're able to practice their social skills and their collaboration and cooperation with their peers, and adjust to different timetables that we have set for them. And I think it's really important to allow them that experience. I mean, so often in the adult world, we're faced with these like huge problems, and we need creative and critical thinkers to solve them. And why is it that a kid with an IEP or a certain disability category isn't viewed as somebody capable of making those huge changes? I think that we require a lot of creativity, and just the sheer fact that their brains are wired a little differently makes them more creative in a lot of ways. So I think it's a strength, honestly, in a lot of ways, to have kids, differently abled kids on a team with, other unique learners.
Absolutely. And I guess what I hear you saying too is that all kids are unique learners in some way, whether or not they're labeled or
identified in any way. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So social emotional learning is a big, thing today in education.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's always been a thing in education, but we're just now naming it and addressing it specifically. Mm-hmm. So when I think about our experience with all kids, how do you think your students you serve, benefit in a social emotional way through project-based learning?
I think that we have seen students benefit because they, for the first time, are experiencing success in a lot of ways. And they're, for the first time, experiencing like, oh, hey, like I've got something major to contribute here. And there's a lot of trust built between the students and us, the 5 teachers that work on the team. And I think that trust allows them to take some risks, and their self-confidence increases. And like I said before, it could be the first time that they're enjoying coming to school. And I think that shift in their mindset is huge, because it sets them up for success in the future.
I remember specifically, and sometimes I think the teachers who are not specifically intervention specialists, the general ed teachers, have a different view than you do, since you're sort of like in the trenches more than we are with the kids. I remember noticing that a lot of the kids got a greater degree of acceptance from their peers.
Absolutely.
Because their talents and their strengths, which are not traditionally highlighted in typical education, the out of the box thinking, etc. Kids were actively being chosen for roles on teams and projects where
Right.
traditionally they might have been excluded.
Right. I've got a quick story about that.
Sure.
So this year we had students write a poem for part of one of their English projects, or an English component of a greater project, I should say. And this student is viewed by his peers as like super outgoing, really helpful, always polite and upbeat, and has a positive demeanor and friends with everybody. And he got up and read his poem out loud to the class. And I wish it was the whole team, but he got up and read his poem. And in his poem, he said, sorry about that, I think that's probably my email. In his poem, he said that one of his lines was, I'm from dyslexia to learning how to read. I about lost it. I thought that was so cool that he trusted his peers with that. And he, after class, I was like, awesome job. And he said to me, that's the first time I've ever said that out loud.
Wow. And how was the acceptance for the other kids?
Everybody clapped at the end. Everybody was like giving him high fives and stuff. Just a positive experience. And I think that was a huge turning point for his confidence and his, social emotional status at that time, because he was saying, he was trusting his peers, his 12 and 13-year-old peers. We all think about 12 and 13-year-olds as like, kind of can be a little bit
socially vicious.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, good word. Exactly. Socially vicious. Perfect. So, I think that we all have that in our minds, and he trusted them with that, and they responded in a positive way. And I think that speaks volumes about not only him and his confidence level, but also his peers too.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Those are the stories that keep us coming back, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So one of the things intervention teachers ask me a lot is, well, how do you modify? Like, what does it look like? I know how to modify a traditional lesson or a reading assignment, but what's your role in modifying a project for kids?
Yeah. So a lot of times what I do, I'm lucky enough to have about 45 minutes a day, depending on the kid, with them kind of in my room with all of my caseload, I guess, in my room, at least all of them 3 times a week. And then the off days, I've got, the majority. And I'm able to front load a lot of things. So I give them a lot of the skills that they'll need throughout that project beforehand. And we talk about things, without ruining like the surprise of the project. We talk about, some of the things that they'll be experiencing, some things they'll be expected to do. We put some things in place with kind of like almost like a little bit of a pre-assessment, writing and journaling and things like that. And then a lot of what I do is graphic organizers. If I had I need a graphic organizer crown. But I have been, that's how my mind works, is very visually. And I know that that's how a lot of my kids' minds work as well. So whenever there's a need for any sort of structure, I'm able to provide that in a graphic organizer or in some sort of visual format for them. So then that way it's just made very clear from the start. And not only my kids, but those graphic organizers help the whole team, because we make them available to everybody. And that's a really easy way that we can structure some things for them. And then also any sort of visual representation, like a video clip, we pull and we show them. And then also throughout, we have a lot of times what I've seen in speaking with other teachers is they're worried about like the social interaction that takes place. And I'm able to kind of scaffold through that as well, because I think that it's important to note that sometimes students on my caseload do have some differences in how they communicate socially. And, I'm able to work with those groups. And speaking of groups, a lot of intentional grouping happens. And that's another way that we kind of set everybody up for success too.
Awesome. Now I'm sort of harkening back to our days in team meetings as the teacher team. And one thing I remember, and I assume this is intentional, is that while we're planning projects, I think the intervention specialists typically would raise questions, about, well, how would this translate into, maybe grouping or have you thought about doing it this way? So in some ways you Scaffold for the teachers too, right?
Yeah, I think it's important to be part of those conversations as much as possible. I'm lucky enough to have that time with my teaching team in a collaborative planning time. And I think that has been obviously crucial because I feel like I'm part of that discussion, not like as a support, if that makes sense. I'm in it with them. And I think that it's definitely a team effort. It's not so much like your kids versus the rest of the kids. It's very much everybody's all hands on deck at all times. And I think that that's important to be so involved in the planning aspect, because you're right, I am able to ask those questions and kind of tweak those little areas that maybe the team of 5 teachers they're not thinking about that necessarily. So I think that it's important to be part of those planning conversations. Yeah.
So what advice, what quick advice, like quick and dirty advice would you give to intervention teachers who are about to jump in the earliest stages of their PBL journey?
I think, well, it's important to have like your training under your belt. I think it's really important to understand the ins and outs of PBL as much as you can at a foundational level. However, I think some people that I've spoken with get stuck there, and they're like trying to make the leap from that like kind of training phase to actually implementing it. And I would say start before you're ready. I think that it's one of those things that you have to jump in. It will get messy, and that's fine. I think it's important to realize that we're adaptable, and kids are very adaptable. And I think it's important to just try it. And if it doesn't work, you're going to pivot and do something else. And I think that's fine. And I think it's honestly a lot more beneficial for kids to see the adult role models in their life doing that too. I think that there are times that we as a team have tried something that hasn't worked out, and we're like, oh, whoa, and then we reconvene and make a quick change. And I think it's important to kind of model that for the kids as well.
Yeah, I think that transparency is a currency in the bank for teachers.
Absolutely.
You're sort of modeling that it's failing forward, Yeah,
absolutely. Good point.
Kids love that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a sticking point for teachers too, because we're used to like owning the learning, controlling the atmosphere. But I love that start before you're ready, because it'd be easy to never start. And what an amazing transformation it's made for us and our kids.
Absolutely.
So my last question then is, if you could summarize, why does PBL matter?
Oh, wow.
Summarize, Brooke.
I'm really bad at the summarizing. I'm clearly very long-winded. But the PBL matters because it's how the world works, plain and simple. Everything that we do in PBL, these kids will experience in what we call the real world, that elusive real world. And it's important to give them those experiences now when they're young, so then that way they've got the best chance to succeed in their chosen career fields, in their family communication, in the all of the spheres in which they will participate. I think it's really important because PBL is a model in a classroom for what the world is. So that's why I think PBL matters.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today, Brooke. It's great seeing you. Shanahan has a visiting program where teachers can come and sort of immerse themselves in project-based learning. Obviously, that has been suspended for now because of the situation we're all in. But you also have shadowing days scheduled for next year. Yes. So if anybody out there wants to see PBL in action and how a intervention specialist works with that, go to the PBLMatters.org website and look at the offerings there.